Okay, cool. Alrighty. Hello, viewers. I am Von Ivan. I am recording this as a submission video for RPG Limit Break 2019. And what you're going to be seeing here today is a game called Neutopia for the TurboGrafx 16. We are going to showcase my latest run here, and I'm going to do some commentary over it and explain a bunch of things. This run that you're going to see here just happens to be world record for this category, and you'll see the timer there running. So the time that I beat was the previous world record before this. So, well, I tell you what, let's get started. A couple things before I do, though. This game is going to be the Japanese version. We do this because there is scrolling text, which you'll see in just a second. And like with many games, when compared the Japanese versus the English text, Japanese text goes much faster. The difference between the Japanese and the U.S. games is strictly language. That's it. And a little bit on the title screen, but that's no big deal. So, all right. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and get started. Here we go. All right. So here's our lore. I'm going to be talking over my run, so you'll probably hear my voice in the background, but hopefully it's not nearly as loud as what I'm doing here. I'll turn it down a little bit. So what you saw there was the evil wizard Dearth teleporting down to steal the princess from the temple, and our hero Jazeta has shown up here and is being told by this old motherly figure, who also is the one that refills your health and saves your game, that she has been taken away to his evil palace on Antarctica, and he has sealed it with his evil magic. And the only way to break the seals is to gather the 8 medallions from all around Neutopia to break the seal so that you can confront him. All right, now, on this screen right here, that staircase that you see me skipping, and you'll see me pass by it again, that contains an item called the Book of Revival, which is what you need to have in order to get passwords or save your game. I skip it in this because I'm going for world record. However, in a marathon setting, I will be getting that because it'll allow me to safety save, but it'll also allow me to refill my health if I reset the game using the password. So what we've picked up here is a pack of bombs and also a medicine. What the bombs will do is they are in the run. They are used solely just to break open walls in dungeons and a couple places outside. And then what the medicine does is it's a single-use item that will just refill your health. So the way that the world of Neutopia works is, as you're playing it, is the overworld, if you will, is broken up into 4 spheres, and you do them in order. There's the regular sphere here, the land sphere. Next, we'll be doing the subterranean sphere. After that is going to be the sea sphere, and then finally, you'll do the sky sphere. In each of the 4 spheres, there are 2 crypts or dungeons where, when you go through to the end, you pick up a medallion. Now, what I've just picked up here is arguably the most important item in the game. It's the fire wand. We are going to use that liberally to assault our enemies and in a few places to open up secret locations. So, with there being 2 crypts in every sphere, they're intended, I guess I should say, to be done in a certain order, where one is more difficult than another. Excuse me. For all 4 spheres, we are going to do the more difficult crypt first. And simply we're doing this because the items either on the way to that crypt or in that crypt itself are more useful or powerful, and we want to get them sooner rather than later so that we can go faster. So the first thing that I'm doing here is I'm taking a bit of a detour. It's actually about a minute or so to go into this secret location here. And I'm going to talk to this old man. And what he's going to do is he's going to give me an extra segment of maximum life. Now, the way that the fire wand works is that it will do damage, or it's like its trajectory or like the shape of the fire is based on the amount of health that you currently have, and it's not relative to your maximum, such that if you don't have enough maximum life segments, then you won't be able to use the most powerful form of the fire wand. You will just need to obtain more life segments and actually have the life, as in not taking damage, in order to do it. So health management is a crucial part of this run, and you're going to see that in several areas of the game. So we're going to the second crypt first here. The fire wand is on the way to the crypt, so that's one of the reasons we do it. But there's also a couple things that we'll pick up in here as well that are important. Also to note about those life segments that you get as far as the maximums go. Upon completion of every crypt, once you return back to the main palace, you're given a segment of life, a maximum segment of life, that is. Alrighty. So there are many rooms like this where you have to clear out all the enemies in order to open the door. Either it'll open on its own, or you got to push a block of some sort. That might sound familiar to those of you who did adventure RPG gaming back in the late 80s. And this is no exception. Alright. So you see here we use the wand to assault enemies that are further away. This certainly inherently makes the game safer too. If you had to do all hand-to-hand combat, this game would be much more difficult to deal with. Had to do a little loop-de-loop there to avoid the fire. So coming in here to pick up a necessary item, and I'll explain a little bit about when I grab it. And you'll see here, it is the key. Each crypt has a key, and you will only use it on the door to the boss's to the boss of that crypt, to their room. That's all it's for. No other doors are unlocked per se by any sort of key. You either do it by defeating all the enemies or by pushing a block, or a combination of the two. So you can skip the prisoners that you find in the dungeon. You can actually skip all of their text, which is nice. Yeah, so here's an example of enemies you would not want to fight with your sword. Using the wand keeps you at a safe distance and does as much damage as your sword as well. Picking up that bomb pack was something that I needed to do eventually, so I'm glad that I did it at some point in this crypt. What I picked up there is the bronze sword. It's going to double my sword damage, especially to bosses, which is going to be really important for these first two bosses, which you fight exclusively with the sword. The wand does not do you, really doesn't do you much good on the bosses. You'd rather use the sword anyway.
Yeah.
So we are going to be slowly making our way, or soon making our way, excuse me, to the boss of this crypt. Just got to go through a couple more rooms first. So this is going to be our first instance of... No, I'm sorry. I think maybe I did earlier. Using bombs to open up walls in dungeons. You can use your sword to pick up items there. That hourglass stops enemies for about like 15 seconds or so. Alright, so here's the first boss. I have named him David for reasons which should be obvious, so you'll see when he reforms. So the way that he attacks is he splits apart, and then he will reform eventually. You just got to hit that kind of, orb in the middle there, and kill him. He takes 11 hits with that sword, so 2 cycles is optimal. You can do up to 6 hits in a cycle. And the nice thing is that the parts that break away can actually be destroyed with your sword. So if you're standing in just the right spot, you can swing your sword, which will simultaneously break the 2 parts that shoot downward, as well as do damage to the sphere. Alrighty, so this is just a walk to the first crypt. This would be a good time for donations. Not too much going on here, just a pretty uneventful walk. We don't pick up any items or make any other stops along the way. It's just point A to point B. So one thing that we'll probably talk about is enemy placement and movement in this game. It's something that I pay lots of attention to, especially on specific screens, and I'll be sure to point that out when it comes into play. But even the tile or even the half tile on which I enter, transition from one screen to the next is important because it can help put you in the right position to avoid enemies or even manipulate their patterns, which we will actually use on some bosses. Use it on a boss coming up in the next sphere. So I'll be sure to point that out as well. So this is the first crypt. You'll notice that it's going to be relatively short, especially when compared to the one that I just did. Want to use the sword as much as possible because it will do more damage than the wand. We pop in here to pick up the key, which again we need for the boss. In the something I forgot to mention in the boss's room. Not only do you need the key to open the door, but if there are enemies in the room before the boss, you need to destroy all of them before you can open the door. So what we're going to see now is me picking up an item that the previous routing and the previous world record holder did not pick up. I pick up this. It's going to be a set of steel armor. He actually opted to pick up the next armor upgrade, which is going to be in the next crypt that we will see. However, getting that is a rather lengthy and it's also a rather dangerous prospect. You've got to you've got to do some pretty you got to do some manipulation and have some luck in order to avoid taking considerable damage when you're getting that item. So instead of doing all of that, we just go ahead and pick up this armor upgrade, which is going to make some of the future crypts a little more dangerous, but it's not too bad, if you know what you're doing. All right, so this is just your basic fire-breathing dragon boss, 17 hits. One thing to note about the fact that this is a TurboGrafx 16 game is for those of you that might be familiar with the stock controllers of the game, it actually has built-in turbo functions, which I do not use, mostly because they wouldn't really do me much good. The timing when it comes to stabbing and stun locking enemies like that now, and you'll see me do it with some bosses coming up here too. You really have to get the rhythm down. You cannot mash. It is very timing based in order to do those stun locks. All right, so now you see we're in the subterranean sphere here, as evidenced by all of the lava and whatnot. So again, we're going to go to what is essentially crypt number 4. It is the more difficult of the two, crypts 3 and 4 in this sphere. We're going to make a slight detour here to get into here, and we are going to talk to this gentleman who's going to give us an item called the Moonbeam Moss. This is an item. It's an unlimited use item that'll go into my inventory that when used in a dungeon is going to light up all of the dark rooms in that dungeon for I think it's about like 4 or 5 screens. The effect does wear off after a little bit, so you have to reuse it again if you need to. Another little detour here. We're going to pick up yet another bottle of medicine. You can essentially hold 2 at a time. The one that I picked up in the very beginning of the game was just 1. This is the other. So now I've got 2 uses of the medicine, which is going to carry me through. It's actually going to carry me through the next few crypts. But we want to use them judiciously as much as possible. If everything goes to plan, I actually will not use. And I don't in this run, but just generally speaking, in runs, you don't want to use any potions at all in this sphere or the crypts in it. So we don't want to do that. So this would actually kind of be another good time for donations. It's just walking to the next item we're going to pick up. We got one more stop to make before we get into the next dungeon, and I will explain what this is all about. So this unguarded abandoned item is the rainbow drop. When you have the rainbow drop in your possession, it will automatically create a little bridge of sorts that will allow you to step over one tile gaps, whether it be like a chasm or a river or whatever it is. The rainbow drop will allow you to cross. Now that screen that I was just on, where I just walked right by those enemies that were next to me, the movement pattern on that screen is not static, so you have to be paying very close attention. So you see the rainbow drop in action there. There was that little kind of river in the way, but having the rainbow drop allowed me to step across it no problem. Whereas if you didn't have it, it would just block you. It just wouldn't let you cross. Not like you would, take damage or fall in or die or anything like that. So you see, this is one of the dark rooms that I was talking about. If I used the moonbeam moss in here, it would illuminate the pattern. However, I already know what it is, so I don't waste the time with the menuing. It's kind of like a W shape of blocks, so I know how to get around it. These ghosts here can only be damaged with the sword, and you're going to see them in a few more rooms of note, and they're actually rather annoying to fight. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few seconds here. Alrighty. I can't remember if it's this next room. No, it's the one after it, I think. Blocks are kind of like in an X shape here. I know to just walk around to the side. It's this room here. So the ghosts, not only do they stick around the sides of the screen there, but you can see they can also just disappear randomly. Now getting them along the sides of the screen is good. You don't want them on the top or the bottom because they float up and down as they move, and they can actually float up to the point where your sword will just go right under them and you won't be able to attack them. That's one of my least favorite rooms in the game, to be honest, and that actually went really well. So that was nice. I'm going to blow our way into this room here. That a key is in that treasure chest. So we use that to get to one of the more interesting boss fights of the game. Now one thing to note here: when you kill enemies on a screen and then come back to it, the number of enemies that you killed will carry over. Where the enemies spawn, however, there's a certain order, like a priority order of those particular slots or spots where the enemies will appear. I know on that screen, that dark screen that had those little little blobs with the little green piece inside them, I know that they will essentially spawn in the slots from left to right, such that if I've killed, like, let's say 3 or 4 of them, because you can progress either to the left or the right side on that screen. Well, if I know that all the enemies are over on the left, I'll want to progress to the right. All right, so this boss here, I'll just go ahead and just lay this out. You can see what's going on here. Alrighty, so that's a boss I affectionately refer to as Stunlock Earwig. The way that boss is supposed to work is that it chases you around, and its body has about like 8 or 9 segments to it. The only segment that actually takes any damage is its tail segment. However, all of its segments will have that stun lock effect on them. So basically what I do is I walk in the room on the left-hand tile. That's important because that way he is straight. I'm straight beneath him, I think is a better way of putting it. And so that way, and he always chases me down. He chases me straight down. So that way he comes straight down to me. I just hit his face, knock that back, hit his body. All of it gets knocked back into essentially one big pile on the top of the screen. And I just keep hitting it with the sword. And everything is taking stun lock. including his tail segment, which is what's taking the damage. Now, again, that is a boss where even though, the method for fighting it is very simple, it is crucial to time it right. Because you saw I actually mistimed one of the sword hits, and he did about like 2 or 2.5 segments of damage to me. I happen to have a lot of life at the time, so it wasn't a big deal. But if I didn't, then I could have been in some somewhat serious trouble there. All right, so any prisoner that gives you items, you can't skip their text. He gives me this bronze shield. This is going to allow me to block the blue fireballs that certain enemies are going to shoot out. Oh, one thing to note, I didn't mention when I walked into this crypt. You need 5 bombs to get through this crypt as far as all the walls you have to blow open and whatnot. But I want to have at least 6 bombs when I come in here. And it's not to have one just in case. I'll explain why that 6th unused or intentionally unused bomb is important. But the importance of that isn't going to come up. It'll come up in a couple of minutes. I'll be sure to point that out. So here's the first instance of where I use the Moonbeam Moss. It's just it's worth about 2 or 3 seconds of menuing to do it, just because there's so many individual blocks in this room, and there's a particular one that I have to push once I kill him, and I'd rather not fumble around for it. I'd rather just go and push it if I know where it is. I kind of derp a little bit here because I can't open that door without pushing this block, so gotta remember to do that. And again, we gotta push that block again, and there we go. All right, so now you see the darkness effect, or I'm sorry, the light effect has worn off and the darkness has taken over again. So this is the boss room. Again, you have to kill everything that's in here. One thing to note about that hourglass item that you saw me get that froze all the enemies, if you grab that while the ghost is disappeared, it will stay that way. All right, so here we go. So here I'm using the stun lock trick again to just bounce this guy against the wall. The way I entered this room was important too. I entered in the center tile and then immediately walked to the position, I guess what would it be, the x-axis position, directly below the gargoyle on the right, so that way I manipulate his pattern so that he would move straight down, and by continuing to do that, I can just bounce him against the wall with the stun locks. All right, so that's the subterranean sphere done. Now the staircase will open for the sea sphere. This is arguably the most tricky and dangerous section of the game, these next 2 crypts. The walks to them, not too much, but certainly this next crypt we're going to do is I think it's the most difficult crypt in the game. So we take we take a very brief pit stop here to this gentleman. He's going to give us more segments on our life meter, and we're going to need every last one, especially for the crypt after next that we're going to get into. All right, so making another slight detour here, we're going to burn down this pillar, and in we go. Now this caveman here is going to not only increase my bomb capacity, the capacity that you normally had for bombs is 8. He's going to increase it to 12, but he's also going to refill my bombs. This is why we wanted to have have at least 1 bomb left over. Because if you have no bombs when you go to visit him, he's going to refill your bombs, but when you run out of bombs, the icon in your inventory that you would select in order to use them will be gone. Despite the fact that he refills all of the bombs that you're holding, that icon will not reappear. So you'll essentially have 12 bombs that you can't use until you pick up another pack. But if you already have at least 1 when you talk to him, you don't have to worry about that. All right, so here comes another very important item that this dapper gentleman in the hat is going to give us here. These are the falcon shoes. And you're going to see right away what they do. They basically double my walking speed. This is important not only to obviously go fast, but also there's going to be some enemies coming up here where having this extra walking speed makes makes it a lot easier for avoidance. So again, this would probably be another good time for donations. We're just walking to the crypt at this point. Got a few more screens left. And there's just 2 more. I don't get hit by the guard there. I kind of just went for it, and I gambled, and it paid off. Alrighty, so here we go. Again, like I said, what I think is the most difficult crypt in the game. Here's one of the reasons why. We've got these wizard enemies in here. Now, what they will do is they will just kind of run around and they will shoot these arrow shots at you. Now, what is significant about them as far as how you are fighting them? Okay, I'm going to interrupt what I said there, because you briefly saw there was a ring that enemy dropped. That is a very important item. Because what it will do is, whenever you're on a screen that has, larger, more difficult enemies, the ring is a single-use item that when you use it, is going to transform all of the enemies in the room into smaller, much less threatening enemies. And there are actually 2 rooms in this crypt where being able to do that is not only makes the run a lot faster, but a heck of a lot safer too. I got really lucky picking up that hourglass there, because these kind of like zombie, armadillo, whatever enemies can be dangerous and do quite a bit of damage. You see me blocking those blue shots there. That's the beauty of the bronze shield. It takes about 5 seconds to pick it up, and I probably save about 5 seconds in that room in where I'm walking, and and in the damage that I save. So taking the few seconds to pick it up is well worth it. All right, here, there you go. So that flashing effect was the ring. You saw there were 4 wizards in here, and wizards are extremely difficult to deal with. I pick up another ring, which I want to use later on in this crypt. So the fact that I already got it was very fortunate. Yeah, I'm only killing these guys just to clear them out, just because I don't want to take damage. I want to avoid as much of it as possible. You've probably seen the enemies sometimes will drop a cherry item. The cherry will refill a segment of your life, which is nice. However, the drops for that are very rare. You also notice these drops here, like these silver coins. That's adding to the gold, to my gold count up there. I do not do any shopping at all in this game. If I wanted to, I could shop and get some medicine and even a magic ring on the way to the next crypt. However, that is a considerable detour that I would only consider doing in a marathon setting if I was in really, really dire straits. But even then, it's not terribly worth it. I would rather just do a safety save and then just play it safe. So another room where you got to kill these enemies. These wisps can be very annoying because they will only move diagonally, but they will change directions at whim. On a whim, essentially. So it makes them difficult to deal with. Again, so not only is that, but you saw in the flashing there, you saw kind of that somewhat ring-shaped pattern of blocks in there. It makes dealing with the wizards in this room very tricky. The reason why we come into this room is we pick up what is literally called the strongest armor. Without it, the damage that we would take in the next sphere would be too much. I just wouldn't be able to handle it. You saw I've already picked up another ring. I'm actually going to use that in a crypt in the next sphere. So nice to have that just to hold on to for right near the end of crypt number 8. So one more set of wisps to kill. Got to push a block in the dark here to make a staircase appear. All right, so this is the room right before the boss. Even though I have a ring, I'm not going to use it for 2 wizards. The nice thing about the wizards is they will only move and fire in the 4 primary cardinal directions, which means that positioning yourself and firing diagonally is the safest thing to do. All right, so this is a boss I like to refer to as poverty Trinex. This is easily the longest boss fight in the game, and it can also be the most random. So hitting these heads with your sword does considerably more damage than your wand will. And the way that this boss works is that the shell will move, and then it will stop, and then when it starts moving again, it will start moving to the position that you're at when it starts moving. So we use kind of the position where I'm at to manipulate. If I can at all help it, I do not want him moving diagonally, because you see the you see the corner blocks there can kind of cramp up. They kind of cramp up the territory here. So if he's moving diagonally, that's just more space that he's cutting off and making that more difficult. All right, now, so I've killed the boss. I'm home free, right? Not so much. I still have this one room left here where it can take damage, and you see how low I am on life. I probably would use a potion there just in that in like a marathon setting just to be safe. But I decided to go for it there, and I'm glad that I did, because that was a really good split. All right, so now second half of the sea sphere here. So I now have 12 full life segments. Like I was saying before about how the fire wand works, your fire the type of fire gets upgraded when you have at least 4 full segments, and then at least 8, and then at least 12, which is what I now have. And at 12, you have the most powerful form of fire. Now, this fire is significant because it will travel farther, it will travel faster, and it will travel through enemies. So instead of like the fire before, when it would connect with an enemy, it would just, it would essentially absorb the fire, absorb the contact, if you will. This will continue to cut through enemies, and that's going to be extremely important in certain sections here. One of them essentially being this room that's coming up next. So the fire will also go through those shots that the little arrows that the wizards are shooting out. Whereas before, the stage of fire that I had before, the shots were actually stopping them. So what we're doing here is essentially like a little micro crypt. I kill all the enemies in that room, come up here and talk to this guy, and then once I've done that, it will allow me to actually enter the next proper crypt in order to go through it. This is the only crypt that has something like this. I don't know why they decided to just kind of randomly toss this in, but you got to do it. So. Alrighty. So this is actually just a pretty brief walk to get to the next crypt. It's actually on the next screen here. These soldier enemies have a fantastic habit of just getting stuck in between like those 2 kind of bronze statues there and just blocking the way. So in this crypt, we will need to have the strongest form of fire in order to do the quick kill on the boss. And immediately I forget, oh, that's right, there's a dagger block there. I probably shouldn't have gotten too close to it. Oh well. Luckily, because we did not use a potion in the crypt before, which is kind of rare, I have an extra one that I can use here on this boss. Actually, you know what? I didn't use any potions. If I would have had to use 2 in the last crypt, then I would be in trouble here because I wouldn't have enough segment. And you can't just pray for cherries. That's just, I mean, that's the chances of you getting that just by luck are extremely rare. So you don't want to depend on that at all. So this first walk here is to grab the key. So I use the potion there, which is somewhat risky because, and the reason why I do it here is because with 6 enemies in here that I need to kill in order to push a block to get in, with them all being spread out, if I have to chase them down with a weaker form of fire, it's going to take a lot longer to do it. So I briefly forget which block to push, but then we get it. So anyway, so I use that potion there so that I can make that room much quicker. Now, the trade-off to that is that I cannot take any damage at all whatsoever on the way to the boss. Otherwise, I'm not going to have that the level of fire that I need in order to do the quick kill. There's only one more room that's going to be dangerous at all, and it's this one. But if you walk in the right pattern, you'll actually block that arrow walking sideways, and it won't do damage. This is the room before the boss. It's the only one that doesn't have any enemies in it that you need to kill. Alright, so this is the crab boss. He has a very particular pattern that we manipulate. It's not really too worth going into because I'm just going to quick kill him, so it's not that important. However, when he got up to the top, he can either move left or right. If he moves left, I cannot kill him in one cycle. I have to do it in at least 2. So the fact that he did move to the right saved me some time there, which was nice. Alrighty, so that's the sea sphere. We'll be moving on to the sky sphere next. When compared to the other 3, we by far do the most walking around in the sphere itself in this one. There's a lot of walking that's going on here. So again, this would be a good time for some donations. These purple enemies, I call them goomies. They kind of look like the corresponding Pokemon. They move very erratically, and they're probably my least favorite enemy to deal with in the game. Aside from the purple-robed wizards, those guys are awful. I'd like to avoid taking as much damage as possible here, although I'm not going to sacrifice too much time, especially on the back end, to get through here. The latter part of the walk to this next crypt is it's particularly dangerous, and without the upgraded sword, which we won't get until after this next crypt is over, it's not worth sitting around and fighting. I'm just going to waste too much time that way. So I kind of just Leroy Jenkins my way through some of this, but I don't want to do it yet, because if I start to just kind of go gung-ho too early, I'm going to die. So we make a stop here to grab a potion. Even though I already had one, I need a second one. I'm going to be using both of them in the next crypt, and then, if I play my cards right, I will not need another potion for the rest of the game. But I specifically need 2 for this next crypt. Spent a little more time than I probably should have on that Goomy, but whatever. All right. So here comes the second part of this walk. There's going to be a lot of big enemies in tighter spaces, and I'm just going to want to walk through them. It's not worth the time to kill them. Alrighty. So you try to avoid it. There's a room up there at the top of the screen. That's actually a save point where you can get a password. I would absolutely be using that in a marathon setting, because this, the walk to the crypt and the crypt itself, can be very dangerous. So a safety save there is definitely a good thing. So you see, I'm just going to have to boost my way through this and this. Usually I get hit 3 times there. I only got hit twice. That was nice. All right, so We get into the crypt. Very first thing we do once we get into here is we're going to pop one of these potions because having the good fire for especially the first part of this crypt is going to save an enormous amount of time. This is one example here. You have to kill that kind of blue flying spirit thing in order to progress here, and those kind of worm things that are reaching out to you, they would block your fire shots if it's not the best level of fire. So without that tracking down that spirit to kill, not only can be very time consuming, but it can also result in you taking a lot of damage. So having the best fire really eliminates the need to worry about a lot of that stuff. So got to kill all these guys in here. I don't need that. Yeah, I get 2 rings. That's crazy luck. But I don't pick them up because you can only hold 1 ring at a time. So picking them up would literally do me no good under the current circumstances. All right, so we're going to pick up a very important item here. This is the Bell of the Sky. And I'm going to put it to use immediately. Whenever you ring the bell, you can use it unlimited times. Whenever you ring the bell, any doors that are shut because you either need to push a block and or kill all of the enemies in the room, ringing the bell will open that door. And this is the reason why we do this crypt before the other one, because it trivializes a lot of the crypt, especially the next one. I mean, it helps a lot for this one too. But for the next one, there's I think there's one part where there's 4 rooms in a row where we use it. So having it, getting it ASAP is pretty important. Again, as you see here with a lot of these rooms, I just know what the layout is, so I don't want to take the time to menu for the Moonbeam Moss if I don't absolutely have to.
For all the spheres, I do the crypts in the reverse order intended.
Alrighty. So these kind of spider beak things are of a particular annoyance. Again, old man doesn't have anything to give us. Our prisoner in the dungeon doesn't have anything to give us, so we can just skip their text.
Hello, let's go. Oh, you suck.
All right. Now that skeleton I would normally need to kill in order to reveal the staircase that I'm walking onto right there. However, those skeletons move very erratically, and they have a lot of hit points, and they will only take damage from the sword. So instead of dealing with any of that noise, we just go ahead and make bell noise, and we just walk on through. All right, so we've got our key now.
Oh, wow. How did I not get hit a 3rd time there?
And then we're going to take a little shortcut here to get to the boss. And then in this next room, you're going to see the ring in action again. We got 6 enemies that take a lot of damage, and now we've just got these little blobby guys that are easier to kill. The reason why I use the moss in here, even though you see this room is pretty simple, is because of that staircase there. If I walk onto that staircase and I come back into the room, the effect of the ring will go away. So it is worth it to do that menu in order to light up the room so that I do not accidentally do that. All right, so I popped the potion here because I need the good fire for this boss. This is one place where I would ask for serious time, because we're going to one cycle this boss here, and he's not going to do any damage to us. Now, casually, this boss is extremely difficult to deal with. However, if you can manipulate his motions and you can time that fire correctly, you can essentially stun lock him in the space. The window to do it is tight, though. So where you walk, when you start throwing the fire, the rate at which you throw the fire is all very crucial to just squeeze in. I think it's 35 or 36 hits of the fire that you need to get on him in order to kill him. So getting all of that is in a very tight window. All right, so we have just one more crypt left. I will tell you that that there is no dungeon for the final boss. After I finish this 8th crypt, get all of the medallions, you basically just walk straight up to the final boss fight, and then that's pretty much the end of the game. But we got a little bit more walking to do here. Again, this would be another great time for donations while we're just walking from point A to point B. There is one very important item that we are going to collect on our way to the... Actually, it's not on the way. We actually are going to detour to pick it up, and then we're going to backtrack a pretty significant amount. In fact, we're going to backtrack to this screen right here, so that we can get to that final crypt. But we definitely take the time to pick up this item we're about to get here. This is going to demonstrate another great reason why we do the crypts in the order that we did. So this screen here, you need to use the bell in order to reveal this magical staircase. And when you get on it, it will whisk you away to this island in the clouds, where you will find, in a very unceremonious fashion, the strongest sword in the game. There's actually 3 sword upgrades. We skipped the second one just because it's not worth the time to get it, and the damage upgrade doesn't do us much good, especially if we have the best fire. But this sword upgrade is going to be absolutely critical for the boss we fight for this crypt and for the final boss. So even though it's probably, a good... I want to say it's at least a minute that it takes to get back to this screen here from where you were there before to get it. It's that important. You have to do it. On this screen here, if I need it, I can bomb that door on the left, and it will give me another potion. But again, because I was kind of you see I'm 11 seconds ahead of pace here, so I can smell a PB. So I opt to skip it. But in a marathon setting, I would likely pick that up. This next dungeon is much less dangerous than the one that we just did. It's considerably less dangerous. So it doesn't really worry me all that much, but that doesn't mean that it's free. So yeah, but again, because I am entering this crypt with that Bell of the Sky, it's going to make a lot of the it's going to take a lot of the difficulty out of this dungeon. That's what I was trying to say. So again, we just employ the Bell of the Sky as opposed to having to kill all of these, mantis creatures. This is another room here where having the best fire is important, because instead of me having to throw each individual fire to do, 1 damage to each of these enemies, which take, 4 hits to kill, the best fire would just essentially mow right through them. It would also mow through and kill this bat, because the red fireballs that he shoots will block your fire if it's not the best fire. So, pushing the blocks in that particular pattern is very important, because if you push any in the wrong direction, you would have to use the Bell of the Sky to get out, reset the room, and then go back in to do it. It's just a goofy waste of time that we like to avoid. It's worth it to use the moss. The moss technically is not a necessary item. And the detour that I take to pick it up costs about like 25 or so seconds. So if I really wanted to save that much time, I would skip it. However, the amount of time that it saves, I'm sorry, the net amount of time involved in, what I lose by getting it and what I save by having it and using it is a net positive, if you ask me. So again, this is another room here where I have to push 2 blocks in a particular order. If I push 1 incorrectly, then I'm kind of done for there. Luckily, I only need to push one block to get out of here. All right, so block door, bell. Going to use the bell here too. And bell one more time. And then this next room is the one before the boss. Just got 2 of these skeleton enemies to kill. Luckily, because we have the strongest sword, they only take 2 hits now, which is nice. Alright, so don't blink on this boss. So we're going to position ourselves. We're going to damage ourselves backwards. 1, 2, 3 hits, and he's done. That's it. Alrighty. And there is our final medallion. With all 8 medallions affixed in place, the mother of the temple will give us one final speech. And then the door behind her will open and we will just teleport up to our confrontation with Dearth. So, couple quick notes about Dearth. He takes 32 hits to kill with the best sword. He can appear on the screen in one of 6 positions. However, if we do not walk to the left or right at all, we will manipulate it so that he will always appear above me and then below me and then above and below, and he alternates doing that. In an ideal cycle, you'll hit him 7 times here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Take a hit, 5, 6, and 7. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you can kill him in 5 cycles, you can tank enough damage from his fireballs there. You don't have to worry about anything. Because I don't have a potion to back myself up, then making sure that I do this correctly is important. So there we go. 5 cycles is pretty standard. Your timing has to be pretty bad in order for it to go to a 6th cycle. And even if it does, especially if you kill him early on in that cycle, you'll survive. So time comes up when we get into the next scene there where you've got all of the denizens of Neutopia in the throne room of the palace, and they all rejoice because the princess has returned. The hero has vanquished the evil Dearth. Everybody cries out in jubilation. And time.
There we go.
So there it is. So like I said, this was a world record. Beat the previous one by 15 seconds. So pretty happy to be using this run to do the my commentary for. But that is Neutopia. Just a couple kind of parting comments about this game. I know we didn't really get to hear much of it because I wanted to turn down the game volume because you would hear, my voice talking with the game sound as well. But pretty much all of the music in this game is phenomenal. So that's something that the viewers are definitely going to enjoy. The other is that with this game, so the TurboGrafx 16 does not inherently have any kind of battery backup system, whether that be in the system itself or in the actual game cartridges. You would need to get a specific attachment that had something called the file cabinet in it, or at least that's how it's referred to in this game, in order to actually save files. So instead you have to use a password system. Now luckily what will happen is whenever you get a password, it kind of sets a respawn point for you if you die. It also will allow you to, when you get a password, it asks you, do you want to continue the game? If you say no, it will take you to the title screen. But then if you go to continue, the password that you were given is automatically pre-entered. So you basically just have to go down and click OK, and then it will bring you back. Now, the reason why you would want to do this is because when you come back, your life will be refilled. And if it's a situation where, I'm going into a crypt and I want some safety because I'm short on potions, or maybe I want to have an extra potion in my pocket, and not have to use it to refill my health by itself, then I would do that. which I would likely do in the marathon. Obviously, I don't do it here because that Book of Revival item that I skipped in the beginning is necessary in order to get it, in order to get the passwords, that is. So we skipped that. So yeah. So anyway, so that is Neutopia any percent for the TurboGrafx 16. I am going to go ahead and wrap it up here. But I'd like to thank you for watching, and I do appreciate your consideration. I hope you enjoyed watching this game, watching the run, and listening to my explanation for it. So yeah, thank you very much, and that'll do it for now. Until next time, take care.